We're back here at the Brentwood Centre, and I'm being joined by the appropriately named Gwynneth Sunshine, who's kindly come down to join us here for the latest episode of Mental Health Matters here in June. And our conversation, I think, will touch on a couple of the broader issues I've been kind of thinking and mentioning a little bit on the podcast. First of all, in the broader issues in society, there's a bit of, lack of belief, I think, or a lack of belief in God, and people are trying to fulfill that that kind of gap in other ways. But then also just having a journey with mental health in general, from dark times to good times, how people navigate in life to get better. And so I just wanted to speak to Gwynneth about her journey to getting here, and what brought you to come to talk about mental health.
I'm pleased to be here. Yeah, thank you for letting me share my story.
So how does it start?
I think generally that for myself, I always felt that there was sort of like an emptiness within me that I couldn't seem to fill. And this was right from the start of when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I was involved in dancing. I went on to do it professionally at a professional dance school. And that was my goal and that was my aim. And looking back, I think I was, in a sense, in one respect, sort of running away from myself because I could enter into another world. A world of creativity that was, satisfying me. And it meant that I didn't have to face up to the way that I was feeling, what was going on deep inside.
Okay, so how did that manifest? How was that awareness? Did you realise then that you were looking for something?
Well, for a long while, I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking for. And I certainly at that stage didn't have a belief in God. But it was whilst I was at a boarding school that I got involved in spiritualism. There were a lot of kids that were doing it at school, and I got involved in that. And so it started with the occult, with Ouija boards, levitation, and then it went on to automatic writing, and I just furthered the interest.
So did you actually see levitation in some instances of the effects of the occult practices? You witnessed some of them?
Yeah, it was very frequent in the school, and I partook of that as well.
And so you felt that something happened from that you allowed something in, do you think, or was there some spiritual connection that happened?
I believe that I thought that this was fulfilling me, and that the depression that I felt, I didn't exactly really know it was called depression. When you're 12, 13, I didn't really articulate it. But having this interest in the occult seemed to be, wow, there's something out there that can
something exciting, yeah.
Yeah, lessen the intense feelings negative feelings that I was experiencing.
Okay. So what happened? How did that unfold? Did you have good experiences, or what did you think of it as it was, these practices were happening in the school?
Well, with the Ouija board, when it started to work, at times you were frightened.
Oh,
it would spell out something on the Ouija board that happened to be true. And, if the glass moved or things like this, it was quite scary. But it didn't really, for some people it put them off, but it didn't put me off. Okay,
so then what was the next stage from there?
Well, I started to do automatic writing, and somebody had just said to me, I can write Jimi Hendrix. I can write his name, but I can write his name exactly like he does without copying, really. And she was getting messages that she said came from Jimi Hendrix. And I was like, oh, wow, because, this sort of music was all the rage at school. And so I thought, well, I'll have a go. So that's what I did. I just picked up a pen and I emptied my thoughts. It was just like emptying your thoughts of anything positive or direct. Took up a pen, and to my astonishment, over, a little bit of time, and the pen just started to move.
Okay, so how did you feel from there?
Well, I felt elated. I thought, wow, there's something out there.
Okay.
And yes.
And so that helped your depression?
Well, actually, it didn't. I thought it was going to help, but it actually didn't. because I was entering into a world there was a darkness about it.
Yeah.
But I didn't really quite understand that at the time. But the depression was starting to worsen, and I wasn't really quite sure why. But I continued to do it because it becomes whatever you put yourself to, whatever you do in life, it becomes a habit, you know. And it just became a habit. The more I did it, the more it was, I'd say it was quite compulsive, really.
Okay, so then, yeah, because my understanding is that the more you do those particular occult practices, you do have a bit of a connection to, some possibly, dark realms or things that we don't want to be engaging with. So is there a realization that that's what was happening, that you were maybe connecting with things that weren't good for you?
Yeah, I mean, I started to have strange things happening at night in the boarding school. You know, at night time, I'd be in bed and I'd suddenly wake up and I would, there'd be a chest of drawers and I could feel the drawers being opened. I could sort of like hear it, and this, like a shushing, a very sort of strange sound as like clothes were being taken out. And I just sat there frozen. And it was almost like a poltergeist type spirit, I'd say, that was operating there. But, you know, I didn't understand all that then.
Okay, so did you have to do some process to clear that out or disconnect from that happening?
No, I mean, you just got up in the morning and went off your own business at school, and that was it, you know, within the boarding school.
So how did that chapter or period of your life end? What happened after that? Did you have to leave the boarding school, or what happened?
No. I mean, this occult practice went on from about the age of 13 to 15.
Yeah.
And then what happened was I had a friend who, she was a day pupil, and she'd come in and she'd committed her life to Jesus Christ. And I didn't understand nothing about this. You know, we were forced to go to church, to an Anglo-Catholic church. So I'd done penance there, I'd been confirmed into it, and I'd had my cross blessed, and they would speak on politics. So I had no interest in God, nothing like this, and she was speaking to me. I was telling her about my experiences with the occult, and she said about her experience with God, that she'd met with Jesus Christ. I don't mean literally as he was standing there, but she'd received him into her life according to John chapter 3 in the Bible, and experienced him as a reality in her life. And I just was gobsmacked. I'd never heard anything like it before. But there was something different about her. There was a peace about her, and just something very, very endearing, and something that just drew me to what she had. I just felt there was an authenticity about what she was saying.
Okay, so that was the turning point for you.
It started to make me question the occult practices. It made me think, well, have I found truth? Have I really found the truth that I'm looking for in my seeking and searching?
Okay, so then what happened after that?
Well, I mean, she just said to me that, you know, you could experience Jesus for yourself, that Jesus had died on the cross for everything that you've done wrong, and that he could, it sounds, you know, an old-fashioned word, the word sin, you know, and it's not very popular nowadays, but it is a biblical word. And she said, God can forgive you for the things you've done wrong, and he can come into your life and give you a new life. And I was finding it very difficult at boarding school. I found it very difficult to settle because I was quite creative, and I felt that, but in a different way to them. I didn't sort of particularly like, living with an awful lot of people. And so I was searching for something more. There was a lot of bullying there. There was a lot of things that were going on that weren't good. And lots of things were making me feel more depressed. And here this girl was saying that there's a man called Jesus who can relate to you and loves you, and he understands what you've been through. So, yeah, I was captivated by hearing that. There was a truth behind it. It wasn't just words.
So what did that mean for you then after that? Did you change your life, and you took a different direction?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it took about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
I read many books. One of the books I read, which a lot of people might not have known, but it was called The Cross and Switchblade, and it was written by a guy called David Wilkerson, who was American. In the book, he speaks of a guy called Nicky Cruz, who had been in a gang, and he'd been quite a hard guy, well, very hard guy, and how his life, in the 1950s that was, and how his life had turned around. And that book was a turning point, along with my friend. And I knelt down in my dormitory, which sounds a very strange thing to do, but I did. I knelt down at night, at 11 o'clock at night, and I said, God, if you are real, I want to know. I want to know that you are real, like my friends told me. And, well, yes, I did. I experienced Jesus' forgiveness, and I just experienced the love of God.
So you had some kind of confirmation. How did it?
Yes.
And what form did that take?
That took that I knew that the things that I've done wrong had been forgiven.
Yeah.
Which is spoken about in the Bible.
Okay.
In the New Testament. Yeah.
Okay. So, but you kind of felt that, or
definitely.
How did you perceive it?
I said my spiritual eyes were open, that I knew that that Jesus was alive, because I could feel his love coming upon me. It wasn't just a doctrine, it wasn't just religion, it was a relationship.
So it shifted the feeling inside of you?
Completely.
Okay, and then what happened after that?
Well, what happened after that was that I went around telling other people.
Okay.
This is mentioned in my book,
Okay, so do you want to start, maybe start talking about then? Yeah, what brought you to then go down that path of finding it for yourself and creating the book? What's the book about?
The reason why I wrote the book was because I did go on quite a long journey. I've had many, many highs and lows in my life, but I gave up dancing. I didn't follow that. I was at a vocational school, but I had an interest with the homeless and people on the streets that were the marginalised, really.
Yeah.
And my interest was really because I knew that God had forgiven me and that he come into my life and made a difference. And I knew I had a message. Okay. I knew that I could speak to others. So this is how later on in life I decided to write the book, but also because I went through many, many more experiences like we all do through life, from the age of 15 right through to middle age. We experience so many things, and that's why I decided to write about my experiences in my book.
Okay, and so particularly with more recently with people's mental health issues, you've been finding a way of sharing your experiences of how you've connected with God to help you get through that. Is that how you help people? You share that experience and change their perspective on things?
Yeah. I mean, what I do is basically I attempt to get on people's level.
Yeah.
To say, look, I've been there, I've worn the T-shirt on so many levels, and I can understand you. Because I think that you have to be able to relate to people before you can even bring the gospel, because you're not trying to sort of just convert people. You're trying to help people and give them a purpose and give them a passion for life again, which often they've lost. And my journey happened that I ended up having burnout because I was very much involved with people on the street, but I was helping people, but I was working very hard in my job. And so what happened was I just ended up having really bad headaches, and it just sort of catapulted really for it with insomnia. And, my doctor said, you're going to have a breakdown if you don't stop. And I thought, breakdown, I was 21. I didn't really understand what that meant. I mean, I don't think you do at that age. Yeah. And so I had a breakdown and I went down a wrong road trying to cope with what happened to me mentally.
What happened to you mean at school?
No, this was when I was working, when I left school.
Yeah.
This was quite a few years later in my early 20s.
Yeah, so there's some things happened there that caused you to have a breakdown.
Yeah, through overwork.
Okay.
It was through overwork. And then this depression just came back on me, but it came with a vengeance. And it was like being in a black hole where you cannot really explain it. You can't articulate it that well, but it was like a big black cave.
Okay.
And you withdraw into yourself. There doesn't seem to be any light. You can't seem to be able to communicate with anybody. It's because of what you're feeling.
Okay, so how did you get out of that episode? What was your...
Well, that episode, I didn't get out of it for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, as a Christian, I had prayed about it, but the darkness just stayed and it got worse. And other people didn't seem to be able to understand, because we're going back a long time in the 1970s. And in the 70s, there wasn't a lot of talk about mental health issues. You know, if you did have an illness, they locked you away in a mental hospital. You know, there was no care in the community.
Yeah.
And I was never manic depressive or schizophrenic, but I did have a really bad anxiety disorder, and I did have panic attacks and this sort of thing, and really bad depression. So my way of coping was I just started to use drugs, basically.
Okay.
And I knew it was wrong, but I tried for probably a year and a half or longer to overcome. And I thought I just need to have my mind having rest.
Yeah.
Because I was in torment.
Okay. So do you have any examples from your book that in ways that you help people or ways that applies to mental health in terms of the ways you got through it?
Well, the way that I got through it personally was that after going through a dark road, and it was about 13 years of where I was in this darkness and in this blackness and leading a wrong life. I came back to God. And for me, it was God who started to heal my mind and heal my emotions. My story is one of faith in God and the grace of God, the unmerited kindness of God that got me through. But there are also things that I did practically, which people can do to help themselves. For example, I made a point of exercising. I made a point of going swimming. I made a point when I was very addicted to marijuana because I'd done bongs and hot knives, and it wasn't just the occasional spliff. And so when I gave that up, all of those emotions that you feel come to the surface again, and then the anxiety comes back again and all of this. And so I had to learn to exercise. I had to learn to calm myself down and get along with people again, because not hide behind the drugs, because the drugs are temporary. I also learned when I speak to people, I meet many people who self-medicate because they find it hard to cope with their anxiety, their panic attacks, their depression.
Yeah, it's very common in society with, as you say, drugs and alcohol because it's a very numbing effect.
Yeah.
And, I've got some sort of suspicion or worries about, for example, marijuana is being made legal. And I kind of wonder if it's coming from a Soma perspective, like in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Soma was issued to the population to keep them tranquilized or subdued. So the fact that a lot of these feelings are so widespread, so many people are suffering from them, that it's kind of natural that, they will be using things like that to self-medicate to stop facing the feelings. And it's only through feeling the feelings that you can actually work through things, but we're not trained to or taught to do that.
I think nowadays that we are more open about talking about our feelings. We're getting there, but there is a high percentage of suicide. I mean, I was very suicidal and I took overdoses when I went through mine. I literally didn't want to live. And there's many, many young men nowadays that this is happening to, that they're taking their own life or they're thinking about taking their own life because they cannot cope. And I personally think that the more we get it out in the open and the more self-help groups there are, that we're not ashamed of what we went through. I mean, I was ashamed when I was young because there's that feeling you've got to cope. You've got to cope with whatever you go through. And, like with the guys, you're being a bit of a sissy, pull yourself together. But now I think we realise that this is a serious, serious problem and that it's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay to feel weak. It's okay to say, hold your hands up and say, look, I need some help. And
so do you notice a difference compared to when you were younger in terms of the amount of people suffering? Do you think that before it was just covered up, people didn't talk about it? Or is it more prevalent, do you think?
I personally think that there are just as many people now as what there were. But like with many things in that era, we didn't talk about it. People were put into mental hospitals and that was it. Whereas now there are the self-help groups, the doctors refer people to the mental health teams more.
Yeah.
So in my book, it isn't a self-help book. It's more my story. It's my journey, and people will read about exactly how my mental health at that time affected me. I was still going to work, but how I took a wrong turn and met and married somebody that was into drugs, and how I escaped through that way. That relates to many people on the street that I meet now.
Yeah, I spoke to Rob Saggs last month, and he talked about a lot of the prevalent issues that he finds with people on the street is after like relationship breakups, when people then don't have a home to go to, and they have to leave a home, and then the substance abuse comes after that as well.
What I have found on the streets nowadays, in my area certainly, where I live, is that there's a lot of people who are on the streets and they've lost a place to live, but they weren't addicted to anything at the time. Of course, there are people that were, and that's why they've lost a place. But there are many that haven't. I have met for many over the last 10 years where this has become more and more, people are homeless in the town.
Which town is this?
Chelmsford town.
Yeah.
That people have had a good job, or they've had a relationship with children, and when this breaks down, their bed is the pavement.
Yeah.
And they cannot cope. And one of the tragedies in our town was that our local, in our community, we have chests that houses the homeless. And what happened was that they had a day centre. So those that weren't actually staying at chests could go in and they could get a wash, they could have a shower, they could, for a little bit of money, they could get a meal, a television, play some snooker.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of respite from the street, which helped them in their mental health issues, because mental health issues increase when you find that the bed is your pavement, and when you find that you've not only lost your relationship or lost your job or your house that you bought, and you find you have to go and take some drugs and alcohol to escape it. So I think it's not necessarily more prevalent. I think that it is just shown more because there's so many more on the streets than what there were before.
I see.
Yeah.
What's the reaction been to your book?
My reaction to the book is favourable.
Yeah.
I haven't had any bad reviews.
How long has it been out for?
My book was published in 2017 in July. Yeah.
Okay, and so you've been trying to spread the word and show your examples of how you felt better, and then examples of how you've been helping people, basically.
When I left my ex-husband, and when I came away from what I'd been getting into, basically with the substance misuse, and I faced my demons, and I started to get more well. I mean, that's nearly 30 years ago. Yeah. So I've been speaking about this for a long, long time. And what I find is that people just relate to it. People say, well, I can relate to you even when you were at boarding school, or what happened to you there. Or I've had bad experience with the occult. But more often than not, people can relate to the depression, to trying to commit suicide. They can relate to all of those things. And then they look at me and they see, well, she seems quite together, she doesn't, and then they just want to know more of my story. Lots of people want to know more because they think, well, you're different. You don't seem like that person in that book. But of course, we change and we evolve, don't we? And we learn and we grow and we seek help. That's the thing. And that's what I want to say through this book is to people is seek help. If you're feeling suicidal, if you're feeling depressed, you must speak out. Yeah. See, I never spoke out, not even to my family.
Right.
I kept it in because I was ashamed. It didn't seem to suit the lifestyle that I'd been brought up in. It seemed a weakness.
Yeah.
But I'd say to the people, even people listening now, don't keep it in. You need to seek help. You need to share if you're young with your family. And if they haven't got the answer in themselves, there are professionals out there, or there are people in churches who do understand. People like me who go to a church, who understand, who have walked the walk.
Yeah, and you notice
and come through. We are a light to help other people. Well, that's what I inspire to do anyway.
Yeah, because, there's been some examples recently of people, say, for example, dabbling in the occult, and it does, like I said, open doors to not very pleasant things. But then, if you go through that and come to God and Jesus, then, that does shift that chapter for sure. And, and these other examples then you experienced in your life. So where now for you? What's the next plan? What do you want to go on to from here, publishing your book?
Well, what's happened since I finished the book is that I've had speaking engagements in varying churches, and also there's a group called the Full Gospel Businessmen's, and this is an informal gathering where people go along and we have a meal and you have a speaker. And they speak about their life before they experienced God, or, you know, with the things they went through, and all their stories are different. And so I have spoken at those. I've also spoken in Chelmsford Prison. I've done this 2 years running, and I'm due to go again. And I just say it as it is. You know, a lot of them can relate to the drugs, self-medicating because of depression and anxiety and other health issues. So I feel that I have a story to tell. That it's not all about me when I go there. It's about me reaching them to give them hope. That I have a message of hope. And I believe that the hope is found in the person of Jesus. But not everybody listening here obviously has that faith in God. But God still cares for them. And also there's still hope even if you don't believe in God. Of course there is. You still need to seek help, and you still need to know that you're valued. And so that's my message when I go around and tell people, is that they're valued. And that if people can look at my life and see that I'm changed. So because of this journey that I'm going on, which is a new chapter in my life, what I've done is I set up Darkness to Destiny Ministries, which has trustees, and with that comes in with the speaking engagements and going around, and people can donate to the book. People can sponsor copies of Darkness to Destiny. Now, those sponsored copies have already gone into the prison. They've also gone into rehab, like Teen Challenge, which is a Christian rehab, it happens to be, and there's also a homeless shelter in Braintree. And they have had sponsor copies going there. People that live there have read it, and feedback when I visited, and personally with the people there, have been that it's greatly helped them. So these are the avenues that the book has been encouraging and giving hope to people.
Okay, that's wonderful to hear. So, yeah, that's the next fantastic next path, and already it's been helping people. So that's great to hear your story. So the book's Darkness to Destiny. I'll have a link to it on the show page on the Mental Health Matters episode. And just thank you for your time, Gwynneth Sunshine. That's a great way to end on that. What a positive note on the work you're doing. Thank you.
Well, that's what I want to, leave it with here, is for people to know that there is, a positive end. That and like I've said before, and keep reiterating here, seek the help. There are people that have been through mental health issues and have come out the other end, and like me, gone on to live productive lives. I mean, just to say briefly that I was homeless for a period. I begged on the street when I was younger. I've been subjected to abuse in a relationship, domestic violence, where I nearly lost my life at one point. And so I've been through many, many things. And I think that also for people that do have a faith, please stand up and share your mental health issues, what you've been through with others. Whoever you are, even if you're not a Christian, speak out. Maybe you haven't got a faith, a lot of people don't, but you can still go and share your journey so that you can encourage other people who've been through mental health issues like yourself.
Yeah, get it off your chest and share so other people can resonate with examples they've experienced.
Yeah.
And know that there is a corner that can be turned.
Yes, exactly, yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gwynneth Sunshine.
Thank you very much.